Greetings. It really feels like fall today in Omaha. The weather has cooled off and it is a new season. So what a beautiful time for us to talk with Cantor Alexander about the Jewish season of awe. Thank you for being with us today. I'm Wendy Goldberg. I'm the Executive Director of the Tri-Faith Initiative, and I'm so grateful that you have all made time to join us today. Cantor, do you think that you could help us set the tone for this by starting us with some kind of centering prayer?
Sure. On the holidays that we're discussing today, one of our central prayers is called Avinu Malkeinu, which means Our Father, Our King. And the translation is that even though we are of little merit, God still finds space for forgiveness for us. So I thought, given it will set a tone of the season that we are celebrating and discussing, and appropriate that we should remember that though we may be undeserving, God still has forgiveness for us. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu Vanenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu Vanenu, Ki hein banu maasim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu Vanenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu Vanenu, Ki hein banu maasim.
Thank you. So, what is the season of awe?
So this month-long, really month and a half long time period is a period of reflection and rededication. We concentrate during the holidays of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur on what we call teshuvah. And teshuvah can be translated as repentance, but it is also from the word shuv, which means to turn. So the idea, not that you are, only, I'm so sorry, what have I done? I'm so terrible, but it is that you are taking the energy of recognizing where you have gone astray and using it to turn, to shuv, to return yourself to a more right path. Our holiday technically starts on Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year, the beginning of the new year. So such as the secular year goes, January 1st, right? People make New Year's resolutions. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to start my diet. I'm going to whatever. But this is a spiritual New Year's resolutions. I'm going to pray more often. I'm going to get right with God. I'm going to apologize for the ways that I have not behaved ethically and appropriately according to our traditions and our laws. So the awe, I guess, is that overarching notion that we're in a season of reflecting on our past behavior and rededicating towards a future behavior.
So one of the most beautiful parts for me in my personal journey, particularly as an adult who has been really close to the work. I don't know if any of you have worked in a church or a mosque or a synagogue. Sometimes, I don't know, I refer to it as we know how the sausage is made. That's not particularly a very kosher thing to say sometimes, but when you're so close to it, it's hard to prepare for these holidays. You're worrying about whether the microphone is working or the people are going to be masked or seating right. Tell us about the month of Elul, both from your seat as a Jewish professional and as a person who is seeking this renewal and this turning.
Absolutely. So we like to begin with a warm up. So if you think of like, you don't just start a marathon, you start by practicing for it. You start with some stretching. You can't just jump in. And the days of awe, the 10 days of repentance, the 10 days of awe between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are really a marathon of repentance, turning, confessing, right? These are emotionally taxing, physically taxing things to do. So the month of Elul, which is the 28-day lunar month prior to Rosh Hashanah, which begins on the 1st of Tishrei, that's the name of the Hebrew month, is that warm-up time period. We start turning our thoughts towards what do we need to say we're sorry for, so that by the time we get to Rosh Hashanah, we can make those apologies, right? Sometimes you don't want to just apologize to your partner or to the person that you've done wrong to, that you've been weighing on your mind, because it's scary and it's vulnerable and it's, it might even have consequences in not just in an emotional way. So we take that month of Elul to kind of remind ourselves that this is really what we're called to do and to prepare ourselves spiritually. And one of the ways that we do that is that in our daily prayers, we hear the sound of the shofar. The shofar is a ram's horn. It's kind of like the original trumpet, and it gets blown. It makes a sound like, and it's considered like a wake-up sound, right? Like an alarm clock that says, it's really time. Get ready, get right with yourself, get right with God. So we take that month before the days of awe to have that calisthenic preparation time period.
Can you just say a little bit more about the process? It's my understanding there's the Elul is more about your relationships with people, and the month of or the season of awe is more about your relationship with God. So are there rituals or practices in terms of Elul in preparing for reparations with people?
Well, so one of the prayers that we say during the holidays says, for sins against God, the day of Yom Kippur repairs. But for sins against man or against people, the day of Yom Kippur does not repair. You have to ask for forgiveness first, right? So yes, that notion that during the holidays, the very act of praying, the act of fasting, the act of doing the rituals is what creates your clean slate with God, right? It's the magic of you were a sinner and now you have a new beginning. And so now we have to change our behavior to stay in that new beginning, but now we're good with God. We have a new clean slate. But with people, there's no magic clean slate. You have to do the work of speaking to another human being and asking for forgiveness and doing teshuvah, doing the repentance work, the forgiveness work, the acknowledgement work. And of course, we know that not every human is willing to forgive you just because you ask for forgiveness. So in the Jewish tradition, you are supposed to offer forgiveness if it is asked upon you, but that is a psychologically taxing thing that not everybody's capable of. So you are considered to have done your work if you have asked for forgiveness 3 times and have changed your behavior, right? You can't be actively still hurting somebody while in the process of asking for forgiveness. Then you have done what is necessary, and even if they're not ready to forgive you, God forgives you for that act. So that time period of Elul, I don't have any specific rituals, but I'm going to say that it's the same. You're going to be taking an inventory of the ways that you've behaved, that you are disappointed and that you know were wrong, and you are going to be obligated to go to those people and speak to them about it. And whether or not the majoritarian of community members do that, I can't speak to. I can tell you that it's very scary and hard. We tend to have some really good like platitudes, like, Cantor, if there's anything I've done in the last year that has harmed you unintentionally or intentionally, please forgive me. Well, of course I forgive you, but if you can't identify a specific thing, then have you really asked for forgiveness? Now, when it's between people who have just pleasant relationships and probably have not really caused any pain to each other, that level of, fixed sentence is probably completely acceptable. Do you accept my apology? Of course I accept your apology. You haven't really wronged me. I'm not really asking for anything very difficult. If you're speaking about maybe a friendship that has been broken for many years, or a long time rivalry, or that uncle that you haven't spoken to because you just can't speak to them, or God forbid, somebody who you have abused or something really terrible, these are very difficult things to really go to somebody and say truthfully that you are sorry to have caused real harm and damage in their life. And it is very difficult for somebody to accept and offer forgiveness for true harm and damage that has been done in their lives. So we start with some platitudes. For any time that I've hurt you, please forgive me. And we hope that that builds towards a real inventory and a real ability to ask for true forgiveness from harmful events. And of course, a real turning so that you are able to not cause that kind of harm to others in the future.
So I didn't give you this question in advance, but I keep doing this thing.
It's okay. I forgive you.
Thank you. So there's the prayer, the Dewey, right? Am I saying it correctly?
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about how that helps in this process and what we do in terms of the physical ness of that prayer also?
So a Dewey is a confessional, and in our prayers, we do a communal confessional. We have like a short one and a long one. The short one is like alphabetical, so it's like a very poetic. They all kind of rhyme together, and I don't have a great translation because is it better to translate it alphabetically or is it better to translate it with actual translation, right? The poetry is part of it. And then we have a long one that says, for the sins we have committed against you. And then we say, 20 or 30 different things that we've done. And the point is all of these are in the we confess communally together all the things that we have done. Well, I may not have acted with sexual immorality, but somebody in the we might have. And I may not have acted with spreading gossip and rumors, but somebody in the we did. So we say it together as a way of being able to acknowledge that I have done this without jumping up and putting your hand up to your fellow men and women saying, I'm guilty of that one, right? Because who's going to do that? But we know that God knows which of those things I personally versus we communally. And we also have confessional that is for the sins that we have not cared for our planet. We have not cared for each other. We have not, right? Like the ways in which not just individuals have sinned against God, but that we as a community have sinned against the community. And it is traditional when you are saying the Ashamnu, which is the short alphabetical confessional, or the Al-Chet Shechatanu, which is the longer sentence-long confessional, to knock on your heart, to beat on your chest, to flagellate yourself in some manner. The goal is not to leave a bruise or to really beat yourself up, which I know is part of certain types of traditions. The goal is that reminder that it's On Passover, we have this tradition where we drink 4 cups of wine, which are considered celebratory, and at the recollection of the 10 plagues that allowed us to become freed from Egypt, we take a fingertip of the wine and we put it on the plate. We are removing happiness from our cup to honor the plagues that have occurred. And I think that the beating is the same way. We are physically notating that there is physical harm that is caused by the sins that we have. So we don't have to whip ourselves till we're bleeding, but we do have to kind of really acknowledge that this is not a nothing. These are not, even the ones that I'm personally not guilty of, are still things that I need to watch for and be aware of and try to not do, and try to help people who maybe have more difficulty, right? Gossip is a really good one. I think most of us are guilty of gossiping sometimes. And sometimes it's like, oh my God, I didn't hear that. How can I help them? Let me go bring them soup, right? Like it's really well intended. I want to know what's happening so that I can be helpful. And sometimes it's like, oh my God, did you hear? Blah, 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 blah. They're so terrible, right? But we could also help prevent gossip by saying, thank you, I don't need to know that. Or please keep the details to yourself, right? Like by not asking questions that lead other people to fall into the trap of gossiping if it isn't relevant to and necessary information. So it's a way to kind of remind ourselves of that. And I do think that like physicality, we're standing up, we're kind of leaning back and forth. There's a lot of like that this motion right here is very common in Jewish prayer as you're standing up and just kind of getting the rhythm of the text into your body. And so that really is kind of helpful as you're going through this 30, 40, 50 things that we have done wrong, to feel both comfort and discomfort at the same time going through it.
I would add, and maybe this is just Wendy Goldberg, the person, or maybe this is part of Judaism, I guess it's a question. The non-dualistic framing of this is that I may not be a terrorist, but I am responsible as part of a larger community of people who allow terrorism to exist. And similarly, what I covet in my neighbor or in your voice that I do not have, perhaps also exists in me. And so this idea that when we offer a prayer in a communal sense, we are both appreciating what is beautiful about all of us that exists in me in some way, and what is broken in all of us, and we all hold responsibility for.
Yeah, I think that there is certainly a sense in Judaism of communal responsibility, that we are responsible for the community. And especially if you think historically that Jews were isolated communities that did not have the same privileges as the other people, the majoritarian cultures that they were living in. And they had to really, care for each other because there was no safety net caring for them outside of those little ghettoized communities. But there's also responsibility for the community. Like if you sin and it gets public, the hammer's going to come down on all of us. So I'm going to stop you. I'm going to tell you that I think that what you're doing is wrong, because not just because I want you to be right with God, more because I do not want you to bring shame or danger to the Jewish community, right? And that is really historically true, that if a Jewish person was guilty, or even technically, historically, not guilty, there was a blood libel against the whole community. So you really wanted to watch each other's actions so that punishment didn't come onto the whole community. In Leviticus, there's this sentence that you should prove or reprove your neighbor, so that you do not incur the sin, their guilt. So there's this really interesting question, right? Like, am I responsible for your sins? And how much should I, like, to each his own, right? Like, it doesn't hurt me, it doesn't hurt somebody else. Why should I tell you that it's wrong? And it's this very interesting balance of, like, how much telling somebody that what they're doing is wrong versus how much is that actually rude and a sin in and of itself. And I think that, like most communities, we don't always hit the balance, right? Sometimes we're too interfering, sometimes we're too hands off. And you look through every Jewish community in the world and every time period in the world, and we're always too much one way or the other way. Like, it's, a sweet spot that's really hard. I'm sure, like, I think about my kids, right? I want them to, like, learn from their own experiences, make their own choices, but I also want to keep them safe and protect them, right? How much bubble wrap do I put them into?
Less than you think. As a parent of grownups, I encourage you to build your children's resilience. And if COVID didn't teach us the need for our children to have a thicker skin and be more resilient, I don't know what ever would. But that's hindsight for me. I've already done that wrong. And so I'll
right?
Exactly. So for you, in your particular role as a cantor, in preparing for this, can you tell us what the role of the cantor is, and a little bit about the prayer that you offered at the beginning was in the minor keys, and can you speak to some of that discernment?
Music. Okay. So as the cantor, I'm in charge of the musical life of the synagogue, but I also teach and do life cycles, and it's a full clergy position. And I think even more so in this community than in some other communities because of the collaboratory nature that we as a team have embarked on. But being in charge of the musical nature of the synagogue. So for the high holidays, right, Wendy is saying, like, sometimes it's hard to be knowing how everything gets made, and you're worrying about the microphones and the masking and not so much on the prayer. So the benefit of being the cantor for high holidays is that I get to start really early. It's also not such a benefit. I'm not ready to talk about Rosh Hashanah in April, but that's in fact when I start talking about Rosh Hashanah in order to make sure that I'm ready, because I have choir people that I am going to be choosing music for, and I have musicians that I am going to be working with and choosing music for. If I don't start really early, then I am giving them not enough time to be successful. So I have to back it up. If we're going to have 8 weeks of choir rehearsals and we need to be ready by Labor Day, well, then we're talking about July. And if I need July, then we're talking about June. And if I need June, then we have to have this runway on the clergy creativity side to get there. So it's nice to have this extra long runway because, Elul is not enough time to do all of the musical things necessary to prepare, while it may be enough time for the spiritual preparation, depending on how stubborn you are. So the Jewish musical calendar changes with the season. Shabbat evening, Friday night, has a different modality, musically speaking, than Saturday morning, which has a different modality, musically speaking, than the high holidays, which have a different modality than the three festivals. Sukkot is the festival that we're in right now. They all have their own musical sense. Jewish music does tend to be in the minor, so it's not as clear as like major and minor. And we tend to also have this setting that we call Ahava Rabbah, which means the great love. And that tonality is very, it's actually very Middle Eastern in its sound, even though it comes from Eastern Europe as well. But that is like, it's a scale with, if you know music, it is a scale that has two augmented jumps in it, which is very not Western to have two augmented jumps. It's not Western to have any augmented jumps, but especially not two augmented jumps. And it gives this mournful I don't know exactly what language to use. It gives a very solemn, introspective, crying kind of tone to the music. And it's not that Jews are never happy, because we always sing in the minor. I happen to think that like minor can be very happy, but it is more solemn to the Western ear than not. And I think that, you know, Jewish music is very influenced by the cultures that we lived in. So the music of the Jewish community from Morocco is influenced by North African music, and the music of Jews from Italy is influenced by Italian Renaissance music, right? We are very influenced by the musical traditions that we live amongst. And yet there is this minor modality to prayer music as well. So like the motif of the high holidays is and we put different melodies to that. That's actually not so minor, but we put different melodies to that leitmotif. So we put Michamocha ba'elim Adonai, Mikamocha nedar ba'kodesh, Norai tehilot osefela. That's a text that comes from the book of Exodus that we use at every single morning and evening service, but we do a different musical melody for it at the high holidays at Sukkot than we do for Shabbat and then we do for weekdays. So that's our leitmotif, and it affects how other prayer texts are used.
Okay, another question that's not on your pre-list.
Good thing I didn't memorize it.
And I'll apologize in advance for maybe pushing a button here, but I'm just going to go there. So attention at Temple Israel is the balance between modernity, you know, what is you just spoke to, the music of our time, and what people, how it's always been, and how we show up, especially people who come less often, who want it to remind them and evoke a thought of their childhood and a connection to perhaps who they're showing up for, which might be their parents or their grandparents, to honor them, to continue the tradition. And how is that for you, particularly in this given year, where you were asked to have a multi-access service with people online and in person to meet the needs of people, to encourage them to continue the tradition and also to honor where we've come from? What are the questions that you asked yourselves? What are some successes and what are some challenges?
All the big questions. This is the lifelong question. These are the continuous questions, and these are not unique to Temple Israel, nor are they unique to 2021 or COVID or anything like that. For as long as there have been Jews, there have been multiple generations of Jews. And for as long as there has been change, there has been tension between tradition and change. So basically forever. So I believe, and I think Reform Judaism in particular, which started in the 19th century in Europe, with a focus on trying to be Jews in the modern world. So a focus on the modern, but not ignoring everything that came before us. As a movement, we have had big pendulum swings, right? We said, no Hebrew, only the secular language, no kosher, meaning don't have any dietary functions. All the music should sound like the religious worship of those around us, meaning church music, right? That's one swing. We swing backwards and we say, let's re-embrace the traditions that we threw out. We went way too far the other direction. Let's reinvigorate Hebrew. Let's bring in the traditions that our Orthodox friends have never given up, right? Like, and we swing back. And then the people who grew up over here say, but that's not the synagogue I recognize. And I don't know Hebrew. And what are you doing to me? And the people over here are like, but that's like a church. I don't want to be that. Right. And so we're constantly in that tension back and forth. And so the goal for me is to try to hit marks all along that pendulum swing. So the high holidays, if synagogue music tends to be 25 plus years behind secular music, right? Like, so our first guitar folky music was written in the 70s while the hippies were playing guitar folky music on the streets, but it was camp music. It didn't make its way into synagogue worship other than maybe when the teenagers were leading the worship for 20 to 30 years after that. So we're talking the 90s and the early 2000s when guitar playing music became really popular. Like, we're still working on whether the band is a synagogue thing or not, right? Like, and we've clearly had secular band music for a really long time. So these, if synagogue music is behind, high holiday music is like another 20 years behind that because of the once a year Jews, because of the necessity to feel like it has always felt, the necessity to feel home. So we try to make sure that we have those feelings. And over the course of our high holidays this year, we have 6 main services. If you came to all 6, you will have heard the most important melodies that you grew up with. And you will have heard melodies that were written in the last 5 years. And
including some Disney music.
And you will have heard a little bit of one piece of Disney music. And you will have heard the traditional cantillation that comes from, 200, 300, 400 years ago, right? You will have heard at least 300 years worth of musical span. If you only came to one service, you might have missed out on the thing that was the most important to you, right? But so that's how we chose, especially with COVID, where we were very time conscious and we were very conscientious of how do we make community across space. We chose to identify music across the arc of the services and not try to do everything in every single service because we felt we didn't have time to do everything in every single service. And I'm sure that worked for some people, and I'm sure it didn't work for other people.
Okay, speaking of time, I need to move us along to the next topic because as you predicted, we're not even barely into my list of questions. Tell us what Sukkot and Simchat Torah are.
Okay, so our Torah says on the first day of the 7th month, you should have a holiday of Truah, meaning a holiday of Rosh Hashanah, where we blow the shofar. On the 10th day of the 7th month, you should have a holiday, a Shabbat of Shabbaton, a day of atonement. That's Yom Kippur. On the 15th day of the 7th month, you should have a week-long festival to God, and you shall dwell in a sukkah, and you shall bring together the 4 minim, the 4 species, and have this 7-day holiday. The first day is a holiday, the 7th day is a holiday, and the week is the dwelling. So that's like my biblical, why do we have all these holidays? Because Leviticus tells us to, and Deuteronomy also. So Sukkot is a holiday that is celebrated for a week that starts on the 15th day of the 7th month of the year, which happens to be 5 days after Yom Kippur and 15 days after Rosh Hashanah. There's so many of them. And we build a temporary hut. It's called a sukkah. And you're required to be able to see the stars through the roof, and you're supposed to dwell in it. The minimum of dwelling is to have a meal inside of it. The maximum is to basically live there from morning to night. It's night to night, really, because you can sleep in it for the whole week of Sukkot to experience the impermanence of the home, to experience nature, to experience a little taste of what it might have been like for our ancestors as they wandered through the desert for 40 years in temporary structures, to experience what it might have been like for our ancestors as they moved into their fields to better be able to harvest during harvest time. Sukkot is a harvest holiday. One of the reasons that the Jewish calendar is both lunar and solar, that we have leap years, is to keep our holidays fixed to harvest and planting time. So that's, it is a harvest holiday at this time of year. So, you know, it makes sense. If you're going to harvest, you should be close to your fields. It's easier. You can do more work that way. We bring together the 4 species into what's called a lulav. This is our lulav. I'm going to knock things over. The lulav is made of 4 green things. Lulav, which is a palm frond, myrtle, and I think it's here. Our willow got a little damaged this year. The willow over here. So we have 3 green things. And the 4th thing is called an etrog, or a citron. It's like a lemon, but not. The Imam told me the Arabic name, but I cannot remember what it was. It was something like nahag, but I'm not sure that I'm pronouncing that right at all. They're very common in the Middle East. A lot of people, he was telling me that, his grandmother's house, there's an etrog tree planted. It's very common smell to just grow up with this fruit growing in your yard. And we bring them together and we say a blessing that basically says, blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who's commanded us in the shaking of the lulav. And you shake it to the 4 cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, up and down. And that's the whole commandment. You shake it. It's a little bit silly, but it's like super easy to do because it's not hard to shake 4 things together in all the directions. And the etrog smells beautiful. If you have the chance, I invite you to come over to the temple to be able to smell one. And it represents that God is all around us, north, south, east, west, up and down. Everywhere surrounding us is God. Everywhere surrounding us is where we're placing our spirituality, our connection. So in this moment of impermanence, we bring together 4 living things and we wave them around. And it's a little bit silly and it's a little bit awesome. And it's, just a way to connect in a completely non-scientific. There's no, it doesn't make you stronger. It's not healthier. It's just what Jews do on Sukkot.
My memories of Sukkot as a child have a lot to do with the bees that seem to find their way into the sukkah. Does anyone else have a high holiday story or childhood memory that maybe they might be able to share? Or Cantor, do you have one that?
So we did not always build a sukkah in my home. My family was part of a chavurah, which was like a small group of temple members who got together to celebrate as, almost like chosen family. And the chavurah had a sukkah that we built, but it took turns, right? So it'd be at our house one year and somebody else's house the next year. And so maybe we got it every 5th year or something like that. So we did not tend to dwell in our sukkah because we were sharing it, but we did tend to have a celebration where we would put it up and eat a meal together. And so I definitely remember, my mom always made a sweet noodle kugel for Sukkot. And so I remember that. And, you tend to decorate it with fall things like gourds and things like that. So we did not ever decorate in our home for Halloween, although we did carve pumpkins when I was young, but we didn't go all out and decorate. But the sukkah was something that gives you the opportunity to, get all of your Christmas, Halloween decorating desires out into the world. I have a sukkah now. I don't like decorating things. I don't like owning the tubs that you put everything into and take everything out of. So we still don't decorate, but my kids do occasionally make a chain and put it up there.
Feel free to add any questions that you have in the chat, or does anyone have a story that they want to share about their own experience?
I like what Karen said, Wandering Nomad Hut Appreciation Week. Yes, exactly.
All right. Yeah, so Graciela is asking about fasting, which we did not touch on related to Yom Kippur. Could you speak about fasting?
Yeah, so in Judaism, we have, I think there are 5, I always lose a couple, fast days, and 2 of which are 25-hour fasts. Yom Kippur is a 25-hour fast, meaning from sundown until just after sundown the next day. And it is a fast that includes no water. You're not supposed to have anything pass through your lips. We do believe in pikuach nefesh, and the guarding of the soul. So like life-threatening things are more important than fasting. So if you have to take medication, you should take your medication. If you have to eat to take your medication, you should eat enough to take your medication. If fasting would be medically dangerous for you, you are not required to fast. And there is like studying that you can do to kind of like make up for the fast that you are not able to do. You should not endanger your life in order to fast. And then we have other holidays that have to do with the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem that are daytime fasts. So that would be more similar to a Ramadan fast where you can only not eat during daylight hours. I personally have never gotten up like before sunrise in order to eat, which I'm sure is an experience that many of you have. That is not my personal experience, but those fast days are such that you would be able to get up early if you desired and break your fast when the sun goes down in the evening. And yes, so no water. I personally, as a singer, I do drink water because it'd be very difficult to do my job without drinking water. I'm sure there are cantors who do not. I feel that this is a compromise that I'm willing to accept.
All right, so we did Elul, then we did Rosh Hashanah, then we did Yom Kippur, then we did Sukkot, and so then next is Simchat Torah.
Simchat Torah. So at Sukkot is 1 week, and then the next day we have a holiday that we call Simchat Torah, which means the Torah is the 5 books of Moses. It also is the word that means instruction, and Simchat is happiness. So it's a celebration of the Torah. And on Simchat Torah, we begin again, right? So it's very interesting. Rosh Hashanah means the new year, and you dedicate yourself to all this new stuff that you're going to change your ways. But Simchat Torah is literally a new beginning. We read the last few verses from the book of Deuteronomy, and we re-roll the Torah all the way back to the beginning, and we read the first few verses from the book of Genesis. So we say goodbye to Moses as he dies, and we say hello to Bereshit, to the creation of the world. It is truly a brand new beginning, and we never just end on Deuteronomy and close the book. We always restart it, and we start our circle of life again at that holiday. So it's a holiday of celebrating the Torah. The main function is to celebrate the Torah and to end it and re-begin it. And we tend to add to the celebration. So in this community, we will be adding to the celebration with what we call consecration. Our kindergartner class will receive little miniature Torah scrolls that their families have decorated for them, and they get to march around and they get to be celebrated. And we welcome them into the beginning of their Jewish education on the holiday of Simchat Torah. So it's a new beginning for them as well. It's, that is, I think, a more modern tradition. I'm not sure that goes back to Sinai or anything, but it's a nice way to celebrate the little ones. And they're super cute.
So something that I don't want to gloss over in what you just said is that every Jewish congregation, without regard to their denomination or their location, reads the same portion of the Torah on the same cycle. So if I was to go and have gone to South America and attend a synagogue, they would be reading from the Torah the same scriptural reading on Simchat Torah and every week that follows in a cycle. Can you speak to the why of that at all? Or
So our rabbis set our calendar, and there's a lot of reasons for it. As I said, it's a lunar and solar calendar, right? It is, our months are based on the moon. Most of our holidays happen to fall on the full moon, the 15th day of the month. But we are also tied to a harvest cycle. So how do we adjust? In a 19-year cycle, there will be 7 leap years. A leap year consists of a full additional lunar month. So this is why sometimes this year, for example, Rosh Hashanah was the 6th of September. Next year, we have a leap year this coming spring. Next year, Rosh Hashanah will be the very end of September. Then it'll be about 2 weeks earlier. Then we have another leap year and it'll go back again. And then we kind of work our way up September. We skip back to the end and we work our way up, how the leap years work. And because it's like 7 out of 19, you never know exactly when it's going to fall unless you pay really close attention. When the rabbis set this, they had to figure out, well, what are you supposed to read, right? This year, Simchat Torah is on a Tuesday, but sometimes Simchat Torah is on a Saturday. When it is on a Saturday, you are missing an extra Shabbat, an extra Torah reading day, so you can't advance your reading because the holiday is on the day that you would advance your reading. So there are 56 parshiot, which is sections of the Torah. Some of them are longer, like Bereshit is Genesis chapter 1 all the way through Genesis chapter, I think it's 7. Then the story of Noah goes all the way through chapter 11, right? So those are really big ones. We had a parsha just 2 weeks ago, it was chapter 31 of Deuteronomy. That's it. Just chapter 31, no more, no less, right? So some portions are short, some portions are long. Well, you say there are 56 parshiot in the year. How do you get through 56 parshiot? There's only 52 solar weeks in the year, and you're saying we're on a lunar calendar. So sometimes we have a double portion, and on a leap year, when we have a whole extra 4 weeks in the year, we separate those double portions. I'll also just note that there is a slight distinction. Some Jews celebrate 2 days of some holidays, and in Israel, they only celebrate 1 day of those same holidays. So we do occasionally get off in the springtime based on whether there was 2 days of a holiday that fell on Shabbat or not. But 90% of the time, all the Jews are reading the same section at the same time. So it has to do really, like the rabbis made us this beautiful calendar in order to avoid certain holidays happening on Shabbat, but permit other holidays to happen on Shabbat, and in order to be fixed. We're very keva community, meaning fixed community. There's a right way to do things until we decide there isn't a right way to do things, or until 2 people disagree, in which case there's more than one right way to do things. But within that freedom of Jewish people disagreeing with each other across the centuries and across time and space, there is still an order, a seder. The word order is seder, which is the name of the meal that we have on Passover, and it's also the name of the book that we pray from. A sidur is the book that we pray from. Really, it's all about order and finding order within chaos. That was a lot. Did I answer your question, Wendy?
You answered more than one. It was good. Good. Again, I would like to invite anyone who has any questions for Cantor Alexander. I know this has been a lot of information. Anyone have a question or a comment?
I do, Wendy. It's about the reading days. Now, the Torah reading days are only specified, during the holidays, or?
Excellent question, Abdul. Excellent question. So we read Torah 4 times during the week. You do the whole portion. In a traditional community, you do the whole portion. We tend not to do the whole portion. We want to focus on something that we want to extrapolate and teach more about, as opposed to spending 30 minutes of just listening to something that a lot of people don't comprehend in this day and age. So we read just part of it, but the whole portion would be read on Saturday morning. Traditionally, it gets divided into 7, what we call aliyot. So 7 divisions within that whole section. So like I said, Genesis chapter 1 all the way through chapter 7 would be divided into 7 segments. Then Saturday afternoon, we start the next week's parsha, but you only read the first section, basically. So you would only read Genesis chapter 7. You wouldn't read 7, 8, 9, 10, right? You would just read that one chapter. I'm using broad strokes, but approximately. And you would continue to only read that one section Saturday afternoon, Monday morning, and Thursday morning. And why Monday and Thursday? Those are traditionally market days, and they would be read publicly in the market. Our first known public Torah reading is written down by the scribe Ezra, as described in the book of Nehemiah, which is one of the last books of the Hebrew Bible. And he describes publicly reading the Torah in the market to the whole community so that everybody had a chance to hear it while they were already out and about and doing their business, as a way to kind of remind people, like, this is what we're supposed to be doing properly. So you read a big section Saturday morning, a little of the next section Saturday night, Saturday evening, Monday and Thursday, and then you read the whole of that second section the next Saturday, and you start again for the next 52 weeks. And then at each holiday, and that goes from Genesis week by week by week by week, all the way till the next Genesis, till the next Simchat Torah through to Deuteronomy. But at holidays, we have special portions. So Rosh Hashanah, we tend to read from Genesis 21, the story of the binding of Isaac. At Yom Kippur, we have a section from Deuteronomy that says choose life, and another section in the afternoon from Leviticus that is about how to behave in order to be holy, to be like God. So each holiday has its own special segment. And one of the reasons that congregations have more than one Torah, we have 5, there are 4 in our main ark and 1 in the ark in the chapel, is in order to be able to use a different Torah when you are reading from a not weekly cycle. It's very difficult on the material of the Torah, which is the skin of a kosher animal. So it's parchment, but it's still difficult on it to be constantly rolling it back and forth. So when you have a second Torah that you can use from, all of your scrolls will last longer. You don't have to read from another one, but it's an opportunity to have it last longer.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
A number of the people who are here today are not part of the Jewish community. So what suggestions would you have for people who want to be supportive of their Jewish neighbors during this season? What suggestions would you have for those who want to be supportive of the Jewish community?
So I think from a practical standpoint, if you can find out when the major Jewish holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, are, which is available on most published calendars, and certainly now that we live on the web is really easy to search on Google, it'd be very, very wonderful for there not to be major events, major sporting events, major tests, SAT style tests, major, things that your kids really feel guilty if they miss in school, your wedding, right? Like, these are things that if you want to be supportive of your Jewish friends and family, that not only will you not schedule, but that you'll help to advocate for schools and office buildings to be aware of and not schedule. I mean, Wendy sent this beautiful letter that they were having a public discourse on redistricting on the day of Yom Kippur. And she said this beautiful letter about how it meant that none of the Jewish community could participate in this public discourse. That is a supportive thing to do. In terms of spirituality, how can I help you celebrate? Would you like to tell me anything about it? Can I bring something to your break fast? Is there a special food that I could, share with you on this holiday. Jews are very food oriented, so there's always special foods depending on your family for different holiday celebrations. And so those, I think, are the main ways of being supportive on those things. Know when they are and support your neighbors to not do it.
I would speak up, just add on to what you said. This year in particular, there were two things that we as Tri-Faith spoke up about. One was that the legislature, the Nebraska legislature, chose to have public discourse on in Omaha on the redistricting plan options and give public narratives on that day of the holy day of Yom Kippur. I did write to the entire legislature, and it was mentioned by Megan Hunt in front of the legislature that they should do better. So that is us speaking up and helping people to understand what it means to live in a religiously pluralistic society. The other example I would say is I was invited to a public gathering of the Greater Chamber of Omaha, which is a business association. And I wrote to them and said, I'm disappointed in your diversity, equity, and inclusion journey that you're not remembering that Yom Kippur is a holy day, and they canceled their meeting. So it is possible that, again, when we kind of go back to where we started, that there's an opportunity to turn and to get right what is wrong, but sometimes people just don't have the information. So to take the information that you've gained today to your workplace, to your schools, to your colleagues is very, very important. Graciela and I have had a conversation. She's going to share this recording with her work group, and that's possible for Tri-Faith to provide resources to you if this or other programming that we offer is appealing. Please use us as a resource. Cantor Alexander, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
On October 14th, I will be having a conversation at Open Hearts with Rabbi Stoller. During Yom Kippur, he did a sermon on the place between pluralism and orthodoxy. And we are going to continue that conversation on October 14th at noon and talk about Jewish law and what it has to say about the place between pluralism and orthodoxy. So please consider joining us for that. And I think it's important that we start to say more often, if you enjoyed what we did today, our work doesn't happen without your financial support, and we would like you to consider becoming a bridge builder. So please, your donations matter. And thank you for showing up. And again, Happy New Year to all who celebrate, and may we all go from strength to strength. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Shana Tova and Chag Sameach, which means Happy New Year and Happy Holiday.
Thank you.